created a color grading action for you with some color scheme gradients. Download these from the post, and I'm going to simply drag these into Photoshop to install them, and they'll install automatically. Let's go to my actions panel, and you'll see there's a simple color grading. I call it simple color grading because it's pretty straightforward, but it provides you a lot of flexibility. So I'm going to play this action. Go ahead. It's going to install, or it's going to create a group with a bunch of sub layers on it. And it starts with the grade base, and this is just a black and white, essentially like a placeholder for it. And I'm going to change the opacity of this to 100% so you can see it in the video a little better. You can change any of the layer blend modes on any of these different layers. For this one, I tend to stick with the overlay blend modes. I don't play with the layer blend modes with a lot of these. In fact, because I think this does a pretty decent job. So if I go to the grade refine, you'll see I want to add some shadow toning. So let's pull the shadows down a bit, and you can see it adds some reds into there. And I want to add some highlight toning. So we'll pull this up and add some cyans. And I can choose how I want this curve to be shaped, and choose I want to add a little more reds in here. I want a little finer control. Whoops. Too many points, and pull this up. So that looks pretty decent to me. So now let's go to the grade level, and the grade level, I want to open my midtones up a little bit. So I'm going to pull this to the left. If I want to darken my blacks, I pull the black point to the right. I want to brighten my whites, I can pull the white point to the left. On my output levels, I want to tone down my highlights. Let's pull this down a little bit, and I want to open up my shadows. I grab the black point and pull that to the right. So you can see I can refine this as much as I want. Again, I've got the color blend, the layer blend modes, and the opacity I can always tweak to taste as well. So let's go into this grade color treatment, and you'll see there already is a red cyan kind of look. So that's why the red showed up here and the cyan showed up in the highlights. Now, if you go down to the color schemes that I gave you, the gradients, if you installed them, you'll see that there is a monochromatic one, essentially like all the same color. And then I've got an analogous, which sticks very close to each other on the color wheel. And then a complement that goes on opposite sides of the color wheel, a split complement that goes opposite sides and then spreads off to one of the sides a bit, and the secondary complement just flips those two colors. Triadic splits the color wheel in thirds, and quadratic splits the color wheel in fours. Okay, so let's go in, and I'm going to select our complement look. Now let's select something more complicated. Let's pick a split complement. That looks pretty good to me. So we'll say OK to that. Now we can go to our grade color shift. And what this allows me to do is actually change the color. So I don't need to change the colors inside this gradient overlay. I can change them by simply pushing this around, and it always stays that split complement. Okay. So I can say, well, let's pull this. I like it's added some nice purples to my highlights, but I want to make some things more obvious. Let's pull this. I don't like that green. That is ugly. So keep going. Okay, now we're warming it up quite a bit. So there we've got warms. And let's change my saturation a bit. It's a little too strong for my taste. So I can pull the saturation down. So you can see there's essentially an infinite number of things that you can do. And you can manipulate the opacity again, blend modes, and things on any of these layers. So now I've got this grade tweak that I want to work on. And I can modify the brightness. Okay, to lift the brightness a little bit. I can modify the contrast. which won't modify the contrast of the image. It actually modifies the contrast of the color overlay. Okay, so and you'll notice some of these layers have blend if applied, and the blend if is to prevent the effects on the dark shadows and the bright lights. Okay, so it essentially limits, and you can tweak those as much as you want to get the look that you're going for. Now, one of the other options, let's shut off this grade color treatment. I've got this grade random color applied here. Okay, this grade random color has a different kind of gradient. It has a noise gradient, and this one is kind of neat because it allows you to go in and say, I want to randomize that. Oh, I really like that. If you find something you like, you better make sure you save the gradient, because if you hit randomize again, you can't go back. You're kind of stuck with whatever it pops to next. So like here, I don't like this magenta look. Okay, so I just got to keep clicking through until I find something I like. Okay, and that looks pretty nice. You can also adjust the roughness. Let's pull this roughness to the right, and you can see if you go too far, it starts to add weird artifacting. However, what I do is I tend to keep this, say, below 30%. Seems to look pretty good. And you can just click randomize again and just simply click along until you find something that you like. And the other thing you can do is say OK to this to accept it, and then you can also reverse this. So you say, well, I've got the colors set up the way it is, and I want to reverse this, and you'll see that the image, it flips the colors for you. So now I've got more yellows and this teal looking colors in the brights. I've also got this film treatment applied here. So this film treatment, I have an option. If I click on this and turn it on, you'll see it adds a matte effect to it. And right now the opacity is set to 50/50. If I pull this to the right, you'll see it dramatically increases the matte effect. And that's why I have it set to 50. If you like matte effect, you can turn that up, turn it down. You can play with it till your heart's content. I also have a film grain option in here. Let's zoom into here and turn the film grain on. And you can see I've got a noise option, and each one of these you can manipulate. So I simply double click. I can increase the amount of noise. So let's make it real dramatic. And I can choose to say I don't want a black and white grain. I actually want a color grain, like a film grain, like a color film grain. And then turn on Gaussian blur to soften that grain a little bit. And the curves allows you to modify the contrast on the grain itself. So pull this, it darkens the darks, brightens the brights. It makes it more obvious. And then again, you can manipulate the layer blend modes however you want, and manipulate the opacity of that layer. And this one also has a blend if on it. The blend if on this one is limited, so it applies the grain specifically to the shadows. Okay, so it limits it away from the highlights, just like a normal film grain would look. You have less of it in the highlights and more in the shadows. So we'll fill the screen with this one again. And let's shut off our random color and turn back on our grade color treatment. And essentially you can get whatever you want out of this. There's infinite number of possibilities. And then you can also modify the overall opacity of the group to tone it down. So you can start from this image and finish with this image. Okay. hope you enjoy, and hope it provides you some inspiration and ways to get some looks that you might not otherwise get.